Monday, November 26, 2018 at 9:52. Could you state your complete name and title for the record, please?
State Representative Tavia Galonski, 35th District, Ohio House.
Okay. And how long have you been an elected official for?
Since May of 2017.
Okay, very good. In which area of the state is the 35th District?
It is in the northeast section of Summit County, so it's all of Barberton and about 6 specific neighborhoods in Akron.
Okay, very good. And then as part of your duties as far as being a representative, are you also a member of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And then the reason I reached out to your office is back in July 2018, the Highway Patrol was advised of a letter that was reported to have contained signatures of members of the Olbc on it, and possibly placed on there without the permission. Can you kind of tell me about your knowledge of the letter or what you know about it?
Yes, sir. I believe approximately one day before that letter became public, I was contacted by to ask me if I supported her taking a step further than she had previously gone in her concerns about a number of issues. And I apologize for not having a specific date, but I know it was immediately before that letter. Anyway, the way that conversation went was, when she first called me, I told her that I was preparing to go to an event, so I wouldn't have much time. She didn't seem deterred by that at all. She insisted on pressing her point and saying repeatedly that she needed the support of the Black Caucus. And what I said to her was, well, when would we vote on that as a group? Because it seemed to me logical that we couldn't do anything on the phone. There needed to be some kind of democratic vote about it. But she insisted on pressing her point that she needed the support of the OLBLC. And again, my thinking that meant the group. There was nothing we could do on the phone. So she kind of got indignant with me and insisted, well, you said before that you would support me. And I said, yes, but that's not as a group. And certainly before we would do anything as a group, then we would need to vote on it. And so she was very, very much not wanting to let me off the phone. And finally I said, I'm not agreeing to anything right now. As I said before, I have to go. And so although that call was disturbing, I really didn't give it any further thought because I had been firm in saying, basically, you can't do anything without a vote of the group. And then it was the next day that I didn't hear. What I heard was a general group. There were several members of the OLBC commenting, and there seemed to be something that I was missing because I couldn't understand what people were talking about. And then I was blown away to discover that she had sent that letter. And actually, the more I think about it, technically, it might have actually been the day after she made that letter public that I actually found out about it, because I just didn't understand what was going on, and I didn't understand why and with what authority she would send that out.
Okay. And how exactly did you find out about the letter? Was it something going around on a text message or members talking about it? If you recall?
I think, and I don't really specifically recall, but what I feel like happened was I started receiving some emails that seemed to be a group kind of email, and I didn't understand. I just felt like I missed the beginning thread of that email, or those set of emails. So finally, I must have asked, and again, I don't remember specifically, but I think I must have called the OLBLC leader, who is Stephanie House, or I texted her and said, what's going on? And that's when I began to get the information. Sent out a letter, and then immediately after that, that's when I learned that our names were on it, and I was like, no, that's impossible, because I was very specific with her that she was not allowed to take any action on my behalf. And so then it began to unfold from there. I know that sounds kind of weird and crazy, but it was just so confusing to me that she would take this step and that I wouldn't know about it. And I started wondering, like, who else had this information? And when people said release, did they mean the newspaper? Did they mean, I just didn't understand.
Okay, all right. And then when you were talking to Representative House, was that when you learned that your signature was placed on the document?
I can't specifically say if that's when I learned my signature was on there. And I know this sounds really crazy, but for some reason, I originally was thinking that maybe she had printed our names at the bottom of some letter, right? Because it never, I couldn't fathom how she could have our signatures. So my original thought was that she had printed our names, and that's bad enough. But then it was only later, and probably again a day or so after, when I understood that my actual signature that I had given for limited purposes and not at all related to this was somehow copied. And does that make sense to you? Okay, good.
Yes,
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, other than the phone conversation you had with her, did she ever correspond with you between that phone call and when you found out about the letter, whether it was an email or a text message asking you to sign on, any other correspondence?
No other correspondence. And again, I guess for me is, I don't know, because what I started getting lost about was, remember I was explaining how I felt like I got the information from a set of emails that I didn't have the original thread on. So my point is that if she sent me anything like that, I never saw it before that went out, and then I would never have approved it, because again, imagine my shock when you physically see your own signature that you didn't approve. My legislative aide has permission to do a number of things, but I mean, I'm a lawyer. My signature is such a big deal.
Yes.
And I think you're probably a very young person, but I'm old enough to remember from law school 20-something years ago, the legal definition of what our signature means. And I think young people under 30 or 40, they just don't understand what that still means in Ohio. So I'm beyond outraged by the time I begin to understand what's been done with my signature.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me.
Oh, no, explain anything, ma'am. I appreciate your, giving me the extra information for this. That helps me understand things a lot better. Did you ever, so at any time did you give authorization, whether it was this letter or another issue, ever give her authorization to place your signature on a document?
No.
Okay. If there was an issue that you wanted to support, how would you give authorization for someone to use your electronic signature on a document?
See, the problem is I can't, usually the only reason I'm letting someone use my electronic signature is because I can't sign it. I'm not there in person. So it's been very limited reasons or use. And I honestly don't remember the first time I was required or needed to do that as a legislator, but I can affirmatively tell you that as a lawyer, I have never participated in anything like that before being in the legislature. And in fact, my limited understanding of the difference between my physical signature and a copy of that signature is that's even really different from an electronic signature. So I know that sounds like a lot of crazy detail, but I'm just trying to give you the background of me never, ever, ever letting someone use that unless we had a specific contract about that one-time use. It's like craziness. I just wouldn't do it.
Okay. Now, as a result of your signature being used without your authorization, do you feel that you suffered any type of a loss, which would include a personal or political loss?
Definitely, because what it opens me up for is what I don't know about who has that signature and clearly who used it. And I don't mind telling you that my first thought was not just so her aide, I think her name is Kanika, and I just thought that was such a breach of protocol that I was surprised that Kanika continued in employment. And again, the reason why I say the aide is because, there are a number of things our aides would need to do, as a fiduciary for us, that I considered clearly her aide must have been involved in, and I didn't have any way of knowing that, but I just know that basically, like, I can't from right now, from where I am, send out any correspondence because mine isn't attached to what what happens in Columbus, our legislative aides have. So anything that gets sent out for me is by my aide. So I made that same assumption as far as aide Kanika, and I hope you followed all that.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. Do you feel that the LBC has suffered a loss as a result of member signatures being used without permission?
And I apologize. I've got to go back to your previous question. Okay. So yes, I feel that I have lost in actually what I don't know about what's been done with that signature, and the political cost to me is credibility, not just to my own constituents who would have been made aware of that because it was public, but who knows how many votes I lost by people wondering what kind of craziness I support by having that out in the public. And then, as you're probably aware, continued to basically republish that defamation. So basically, after that time, instead of retracting it and apologizing, she continued to double down on that. And by her public display, also in testimony, she further ratified her silliness and stupidness. And I find that so offensive. So I'll never know the opportunity cost to myself as far as the use of my signature for basically for craziness. And and she attached me to her sort of meandering, mendacious, wandering confusion, and it's horrible. So now going to your next question about the OLBC. Well, yes, again, I'm sure that they've lost all kinds of credibility because you had a former member who was a member at the time just going off on some rogue, incendiary craziness that the rest of us had to endure. And so, what happens is I think basically there's a general loss of funding and people being willing to give contributions to craziness. And we'll never know exactly what that number is, but I'd like to say it's a loss of good faith and goodwill.
Right, okay. And do you feel you're a victim as a result of your signature being used without your permission?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess as a result of those questions and that last answer, are you wishing to pursue charges again?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Ma'am, is there anything else I did not ask you about you feel I should know regarding, I guess, the whole issue or anything you feel would be beneficial for this case?
The only thing I think that's important for you to understand, which I don't even know if you might already, is before the signature event, and even after the signature event, she carried out basically a campaign of bullying, threatening, with using her husband to do it as well, which was a full and total disruption of our ability to just do any work for our own offices and for our own constituents. And that is just unacceptable. And I need you to understand that she did that before and after. But at the same time, before that, she also was in the process of doing some good work. It's just that, clearly the bad and the difficult and disruptive outweighed any of the good, in my opinion.
Now, let me ask you this. When you say they carried out a campaign of bullying, anything, so as a result of this letter and I guess the issues that arose due to the result of that, is there any kind of bullying or intimidation or anything on their part following the letter?
Gosh, it's too numerous for me to go into even now, but some of the things included continuing to disseminate that same letter and information, as if we had supported it. So she did that afterwards. And then the other thing was, anytime she got a chance to discuss it publicly, she would do that, which I considered very harmful. And finally, there was, and you should try to get the tape from the State House testimony in, I believe it was Criminal Justice Committee, where she publicly made a statement about these events that I'm talking to you while in the course of giving testimony about one of her bills. And that's outrageous. So, I mean, you know, that was just, I couldn't believe it when it was happening. It was so shocking, appalling, and over the top. And of course, as members of the minority, the majority is in control, so they wouldn't have anything to gain by reining her in, and they didn't. They just let her go on and on with her craziness right there at a public hearing. And again, I just find that to be so outrageous because it was after the letter, and it was just more over the top craziness.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you know approximately a time frame of when she would have testified to the Criminal Justice Committee and made some of these statements?
I wish I could. So clearly it had to have been after the July incident. So if I were you and I'm trying to focus this down, I would look to what's called sponsored testimony on one of her bills in Criminal Justice Committee, which typically happens on a Tuesday. So I would look sometime after July, maybe August, and then try to, after that July date, and then try to hone it down then. It was just so upsetting.
And she was just making, I guess, statements regarding the letter that she sent out. Is that kind of right?
She seemed to more be suggesting other activities that she had taken as a result of that. So she was mentioning something rambling about the leader Strayhorn, and how suggesting that he, and I don't think she remembers Stephanie, I don't think she stated Rep. House by name, but she might have, but I certainly remember her mentioning Leader Strayhorn, that she was suggesting that somehow they had kept up a campaign against her, but really I knew it was the opposite, and just to do that publicly like that, that's a form of like bullying, because why would you go on and include that in what's called basically your professional testimony about a bill, and then to have that on the record is just, I think that's a form of bullying. I felt bullied sitting there.
Okay. All right.
Because her husband was in the room. I'm sorry, I forgot. I just remembered. Because her husband was in that room recording the whole thing. Like, for what, I don't know, but I just assumed for Facebook. So then that got published even more and more times. Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Let's see if I can find that. They may have posted it on Facebook or YouTube.
Right.
So maybe I'll see if I can find something, kind of hear some of the comments she's making.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, ma'am, what I'm going to do here real quick is I'm going to stop the recorder, and then I'll just talk to you here real quick. So this interview will conclude at 10:10.